Iranian missiles struck the United States military base at Diego Garcia last night. Not a base in the Gulf, not a facility in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, or Bahrain. Diego Garcia. The remote atoll in the Indian Ocean lies 4,000 kilometers from Iranian territory. The island the United States has treated for 4 decades as its most secure, most distant, and most reliable regional staging base for major military operations in the Middle East. The base that was never supposed to be inside Iran's threat envelope. The base that planners, commanders, and intelligence analysts across the Western defense establishment believed sat beyond the reach of Iranian ballistic missiles, and yet it was hit. This is the base from which B-2 Spirit bombers have been flying deep penetration strike missions against hardened Iranian infrastructure. The base where the logistics network sustaining American military operations across the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf is concentrated. The place where 4,000 kilometers was supposed to be protected. Instead, it became distance that no longer mattered. That moat just got crossed. The explosion that resulted from Iranian ballistic missiles striking Diego Garcia's airfield infrastructure is visible in commercial satellite imagery that was captured within the hour. The runway that has been launching B-2 missions into Iranian airspace is damaged. The fuel storage infrastructure that has been sustaining those missions is on fire. The communications infrastructure that has been linking Diego Garcia to the broader American command network in the theater is disrupted. And the assumption that Diego Garcia was safe, that its distance made it untouchable, that the 4,000 kilometers between the atoll and Iranian missile batteries was a protection that no weapon Iran possessed could defeat, has been proven wrong this morning in the most direct and most consequential possible way. In the next few minutes, I will show you exactly what Iran fired to reach Diego Garcia, how a missile travels 4,000 kilometers and still hits a target, with the precision required to produce the damage that the satellite imagery is showing, what Diego Garcia actually is, and why hitting it changes the operational geometry of this entire conflict, and what a world in which Iran can reach the most distant American military installation in the region means, for every assumption about American military power projection that this conflict has been built on. Before we get into it, thanks for watching. Your support is what keeps this going, and I genuinely appreciate every one of you here. Make sure you are subscribed and like the video so more people can follow this. Now, let's get into it. To understand why the Diego Garcia strike is the single most strategically significant development in this conflict, you need to understand what Diego Garcia actually is, and why its geographic position has made it the cornerstone of American power projection in the region for 4 decades. Diego Garcia is a coral atoll in the Chagos Archipelago in the central Indian Ocean. It is administered under a British-American joint military agreement and hosts Naval Support Facility Diego Garcia, which is the largest American military installation in the Indian Ocean region. The base sits approximately 4,000 kilometers from the Iranian coast at its closest point. That distance is not an accident of geography that the United States happened to benefit from. It was a deliberate, strategic choice. The United States invested in Diego Garcia specifically because its distance from potential adversaries in the Middle East and South Asia made it effectively immune to the strike systems those adversaries operated. During the Cold War, it was outside the range of Soviet intermediate-range ballistic missiles targeted at the region. During the Gulf War, it was outside the range of anything Iraq operated. During the Afghanistan campaign, it was outside the range of anything the Taliban or Al-Qaeda could threaten. During every subsequent Middle East military operation, it has been outside the range of every Iranian missile system that Western intelligence assessed as operational. That immunity from the local threat environment made Diego Garcia uniquely valuable as a military installation. You could stage forces there, preposition equipment there, operate long-range aircraft from there, and manage the logistics chain for regional operations from there without worrying about the base itself being struck. The B-2 Spirit bombers that have been conducting deep penetration strike missions against Iranian-hardened underground infrastructure throughout this conflict have been operating from Diego Garcia. They cannot operate from bases in the Gulf region because those bases have been struck repeatedly by Iranian missiles. Al Uaid is damaged. Prince Sultan is damaged. The Fifth Fleet facility at Bahrain is effectively non-operational. Diego Garcia was the fallback. The distant, immune, untouchable base from which the most capable American strike aircraft could continue operating while the forward bases in the Gulf theater absorbed Iranian missile attacks. Iran just hit the fallback. The specific weapon Iran used to reach Diego Garcia is the element of this morning's strike that deserves the most careful analysis because it tells you something specific and alarming about the current state of Iranian ballistic missile capability. The FAT-2 has a range of approximately 1,500 kilometers. The Khorramshahr-4 has a range of approximately 2,000 kilometers. The Shab-3 extended range variants reach approximately 2,000 kilometers. None of those systems can reach Diego Garcia from Iranian territory. 4,000 kilometers requires something different, something that Western intelligence has been tracking the development of and assessing with varying degrees of certainty about its operational status. Iran's Khorramshahr, 4 inches, its maximum range configuration with a reduced warhead, has been assessed by some analysts as potentially reaching 3,000 kilometers, but 3,000 is not 4,000. The strike on Diego Garcia this morning represents either the operational debut of an Iranian ballistic missile, with a range that Western intelligence has significantly underestimated, or the operational debut of a system that has been in development and has not previously been tested at its maximum range in a way that was observable to Western intelligence. The Qadr-H missile, an Iranian liquid-fueled ballistic missile based on the Shahab-3 design family, has been assessed at ranges approaching 10 kilometers in its standard configuration. Extended range versions with reduced payload have been estimated at higher ranges, but those estimates have been contested within the intelligence community. The Khorramshahr series, which uses a more advanced propulsion system than the Shahab family, has been assessed with maximum range estimates that vary significantly between different intelligence agencies. What is now known because it happened is that Iran fired a ballistic missile or missiles from Iranian territory, and one or more warheads reached Diego Garcia. The assessment of what specific system achieved that range is going to be the most urgent intelligence question in every Western defense ministry for the next 72 hours. Because the answer determines not just how Iran hit Diego Garcia this morning, it determines what else Iran can hit that was previously assessed as beyond its reach. The damage picture at Diego Garcia that is emerging from commercial satellite imagery and from regional aviation tracking data that has stopped showing the departure signatures of B-2 missions from the base is significant and specific. The main runway at Naval Support Facility Diego Garcia is the infrastructure that makes the base operationally relevant for the B-2 missions that have been conducting strike operations against Iranian targets. AB-2 requires a runway of sufficient length to take off with a full weapons load. Diego Garcia's runway, approximately 3,600 meters in length, is sufficient for B-2 operations. Commercial satellite imagery from the hours following the Iranian strike shows damage consistent with ballistic missile impacts on or near the runway surface. Runway damage does not require a direct hit on the runway itself to produce operational disruption. Craters adjacent to the runway surface, blast damage to the runway edge, lighting and navigation systems, and debris from impacts in the overrun areas can all make a runway non-operational for the precision aircraft operations that B-2 missions require, even if the runway surface itself has not been directly struck. The fuel storage infrastructure at Diego Garcia is the second category of damage visible in the satellite imagery. Aviation fuel stored at Diego Garcia has been the operational lifeblood of the B-2 mission cycle in this conflict. Two missions from Diego Garcia to Iranian target sets require aerial refueling both inbound and outbound because the round-trip distance exceeds the aircraft's unrefueled combat radius. But the ground fuel infrastructure at Diego Garcia is what fills the KC-135 tankers that provide that aerial refueling. Damage to the ground fuel storage infrastructure does not just affect aircraft operating from the base. It affects the entire refueling chain extending into the operational area. Fire in the fuel storage area, visible in satellite imagery as a significant thermal signature, means fuel that was stored there is burning, rather than being available for the mission cycle that was supposed to continue after this. Morning. The communications and command infrastructure at Diego Garcia is the third category of damage and is the most difficult to assess from commercial satellite imagery. However, it is also the most significant for the operational picture. Diego Garcia hosts communication systems that connect American military assets across the Indian Ocean region to the broader command network. Disruption of that connectivity, even temporarily, affects the command picture available to military commanders at a moment when systems are already degraded following strikes elsewhere. Now, let us talk about what hitting Diego Garcia means strategically, because this is where the implications extend far beyond physical damage. The strategic logic of Diego Garcia as a military installation was always its immunity from the local threat environment. That immunity justified decades of investment, infrastructure, and operational dependency, as it was treated as the untouchable backstop of American power projection in the region. That property no longer exists. Iran has demonstrated that it can reach Diego Garcia. It has not demonstrated that it can reach it reliably, repeatedly, and with sufficient precision to deny the base indefinitely. But it has demonstrated reach. That single fact changes the operational calculus in two immediate ways. The first change is in the risk assessment for B-2 operations. Crews have been operating under the assumption that their launch and return base was safe. That assumption is now gone. A crew that launches from a base that was struck before takeoff cannot be certain the runway will be operational upon return. That uncertainty does not make operations impossible, but it changes the risk calculation for every mission. It also forces contingency planning to account for the possibility that the home base may not be available for landing. The second change is in the dependency structure of American operations in the theater. Diego Garcia was the fallback precisely because forward bases had been struck. If Diego Garcia is no longer immune, that fallback disappears. American military operations are now dependent on bases that have already been hit, a diminished carrier force, and a logistics chain disrupted at multiple points. The operational picture that existed on day one of the conflict, where Diego Garcia served as a secure anchor, no longer exists. The United States is now operating in a theater where no base can be definitively considered beyond the reach of Iranian ballistic missiles. This represents a fundamental shift in how power is projected and sustained in the region. The political consequences in Washington are arriving rapidly. Diego Garcia's status as an untouchable base was central to early confidence in the military operation. If that assumption is no longer valid, then every assessment about Iranian capabilities must be revised. Every operational plan that depended on Diego Garcia as a secure fallback must also be reconsidered, and allied governments must now reassess their own exposure. Allies who declined to participate in the coalition now have stronger justification for that decision. A conflict in which Iran can strike the most distant American base in the region is one that potentially encompasses every military installation in the Indian Ocean. No host nation can now assume its territory lies outside the conflict's strike envelope. This dramatically expands the perceived geographic scope of the war. The open question now is the most expansive yet. If Iran can reach 4,000 kilometers, what is the true maximum range of its most capable ballistic missile systems, and what else falls within that range that was previously considered safe? American forces in Djibouti, Kuwait, Bahrain, and beyond may now be within reach. Every installation from the Mediterranean to the Western Pacific must be reassessed under this new reality. The answer is being urgently revised across Western intelligence agencies. That revision begins with the realization that previous estimates were wrong by at least 4,000 kilometers, and that realization changes everything about how this conflict is understood moving forward. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you being here. Drop your thoughts in the comments. If Iran's strike demonstrates that its missile range has been significantly underestimated, what does that mean for every other American base previously considered safe? At what point does a conflict where no base is outside the strike envelope force a fundamental shift in how the United States positions and defends its forces in peacetime? Let me know below. Subscribe and like the video if you want to stay updated.